beautiful people.
Hey, how you doing?
So I'm so excited to share that I'm starting a new series on this channel. The story of how it kind of all came to be and how I got inspired to do it is so cool to me, and I can't wait to share that with you. But first I just want to talk about what I'm going to be doing in this series, what we're going to be learning. Basically, I'm taking a lot of the main reasons why people don't believe in God, and I'm going to talk about why people don't believe in Him, trying to get in their shoes and understand their thinking and say, okay, I understand your point, but even with that, here's why I still believe. Okay, so this is not me trying to prove everyone wrong or anything, but honestly, just walk in people's shoes and trying to understand their thinking and just say, okay, I get it, but here's why I still believe even with that, okay? So this brings me to why I started this series, which is cool because it goes back to how God's timing is so perfect. For my major, we have to go into classrooms. I'm an elementary education major, by the way. So I want to be a teacher. And so for my major, we have to go into elementary classrooms and observe and teach lessons and stuff. And for this particular one, I was just observing in a science classroom, an elementary one, and they were learning about forces, like a push or a pull or an object, or friction, gravity, that kind of stuff. They were just learning the very basic stuff about forces. And they were watching a video, and in the video, this kid was asking a scientist questions. And the question that the kid asked to the scientist and his answer literally inspired this entire thing. It was what? It was so cool. So what the kid asked the scientist was, let me read it to you to make sure I have it perfectly word for word. Okay. The student asked the scientist this: how do we know that forces exist if they are invisible?
All right, so everyone remember, that's the question. How do we know forces exist if they are invisible? And I think I have a pretty good answer, but let's see what the scientist's answer was.
And then the scientist's answer to this kid was, we know that forces exist because they affect everything and are always at work, even though we can't see them. Now, to me, sitting in this class, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And so I wrote it down as fast as I could, and then literally just change a couple of words. This is why it's so cool. Change 2 or 3 words and you have this question: how do we know that God exists if He is invisible? Answer: we know God exists because He affects everything and is always at work, even though we can't see Him.
How do we know insert thing here exists if it's invisible? Answer: we know insert thing exists because it is always doing things, even though we can't see it doing things, and it affects everything. Why can't we swap the words out to just prove the existence of literally anything?
I love that, okay? Because think about this, gravity. We can't see it, right? But
No, that's not right. We can see gravity. I'm looking at it right now. I'm looking and experiencing it right now, and I see it all the time. What do you mean we can't see gravity? In what way is gravity invisible?
obviously, we know that it's real because I'm sitting on the ground right now. I'm not floating around, right?
And I presume that you see that, and anyone watching your video sees that. So how is gravity invisible?
And just like that, we can't see God, but we can see the evidence of Him all around us. I believe that there is so much evidence for Him being here on earth because of the way He's affecting everything and working in everything. And I have 2 big lists, not huge, I have 2 lists of things that I've just wrote down of how He's worked in my life, or how I've seen Him working in other people's lives, and how He's affecting everything. And even these lists, I'm going to explain this, but these lists that I'm going to share with you, that's not even scratching the surface of everything that God is doing and how He's affecting everything. We can't wrap our minds around Him.
But we can wrap our minds around Him enough to believe in Him.
Starting with how He affects everything. God is the one who causes the sun to rise, right?
No, not right. Remember.
And I'm going to talk about why people don't believe in Him, trying to get in their shoes and understand their thinking and say, okay, I understand your point, but even with that, here's why I still believe. Okay, so
a non-believer would not believe that God causes the sun to rise.
Every day, when we wake up, we don't even realize that, someone, I think, has to be in control of us waking up every morning, causing the sun to rise. Those little things that happen every day, I think that someone has to be in control of all of that.
Okay, but why? This video is supposed to be about why. And while it's all well and good for you to tell me that you believe someone has to be waking us up, I see no reason why that would be the case as a non-believer. And again, if this video is aimed at non-believers, you're not communicating effectively to non-believers.
One of the ways he's affecting us is like he's causing the sun to rise. He's causing us to wake up every day. The next one, he gives us breath in our lungs. Like the reason why we can breathe right now, like we have breath in our lungs, is because God is the one breathing into us every day and every moment.
Okay, but what about people that have breathing problems or people who suffocate to death? Is that because God just decided to restrict their access to air?
How I can live, how I can treat people, all of that is because he is changing everything, okay? I have the capability to love my enemies. I have the capability to forgive them and to love them. I couldn't do that if not for him affecting me, if not for him loving me first.
So what you're saying is you could not love your enemies if God hadn't loved you first. Is this to insinuate that before Jesus died on the cross, no one ever loved their enemies, and no one ever forgave their enemies? Why is God an integral part of that process, and why would God's existence or lack thereof inhibit that process?
Like the last thing I wrote on here is like, there are so many other things that I can't even begin to understand, but every day when like things work out perfectly, like the organs in our bodies work so perfectly, in our cells, like everything goes right, like I don't think that's all just happening randomly. I think that there's a creator like in control, like working and doing things, affecting everything.
What do you mean everything works perfectly? Because different people's bodies are different, and there are plenty of times where everything doesn't work perfectly. That's why we need doctors and hospitals and medicines and all of that. If everything worked perfectly all of the time, why would we need medical science? Furthermore, to say that the only other option is, well, it's just happening randomly, why do you think happening randomly and there is a creator are the only two explanations for why human bodies seem to function sometimes?
So that is how he affects everything. That's my short list, okay? But just know that it goes much, much deeper than that, and like he is affecting everything, even the things that we don't understand that he's doing.
Okay, but how though? And I'm not asking how do these things function, I'm asking how does God affect these things? You seem to just be observing a phenomenon and attributing that to God, but you have to explain the connection. Is God like taking air from nowhere and like stuffing it in people's lungs every time they breathe? Like what is the mechanism by which God makes the sun rise or God does anything?
Okay, so the next section is how God is at work, okay? This one's a little bit longer, but it's so cool because I think this one is more obvious, I guess. Like, if you really look, like, you can see how God's working in people's lives and in your own life, too. So,
what is the difference between this section and the previous section? Because they sound similar to me.
How is he at work? God is working in our hearts and our lives every day, okay? God can soften the hardest of hearts, and he can change hearts, he can transform lives, he can heal broken hearts, restore what's been broken, like our hearts, like he's constantly chasing after them and just working in them. So with our hearts, like just that one thing that I'm talking about, you can see all the things that he's doing. Like right now, he is healing. Right now, he's changing. Right now, he's restoring. That's just the beginning. Like I said earlier, just scratching the surface of what he's doing. That's one thing that God's doing, is working in hearts, changing hearts, healing hearts.
If I told you I was working in your heart, what would that sentence mean? What's the difference between softening a heart and changing a heart? And what does it even mean to change or soften a heart? And how is that not impeding one's free will?
He's making all of his plans work out for us perfectly. This one, it kind of takes time to see this, because when you look back at your life and see like, wow, everything worked out so perfectly for me, you know? All these things that happened to me, they worked out.
Okay, but what if they don't work out? What if you just die horribly of cancer in a pit and no one even knows you existed? What about people who get kidnapped and tortured and die that way? What about people who die in horrific natural disasters? What about all these people lets you believe that, quote, everything worked out perfectly for them?
How did that happen? That's not because of just randomly things working out.
How do you know that? How do you know it wasn't just because things randomly worked out?
That was because he was working in your situation. He was making everything work out perfectly. Like, there's a reason why it all worked out, and that's because he was affecting it.
Again, what about all the times it didn't work out perfectly? Or do you think everything that happens is always working out perfectly all of the time?
All right, the last couple I'm just going to read because I have so much more to share, and I want to make sure I get there. So God is always providing for our needs, answering prayers in really cool ways, working through us to encourage and teach and help other people in the perfect timing, and to put us in places that we need to be. God is affecting us because he's putting us right where we need to be, right in the perfect timing.
And also not interfering with our free will somehow.
Okay, so the next part of this, I am not sure if this is going to make a ton of sense, so I'm going to try my best to explain. But I found this on the internet, and I thought it was really cool and had a lot to do with why we can't see God. So I have a little diagram. Okay, I'm not the best drawer in the world, but basically,
I'm going to let this play out, but I feel it necessary that if God is truly omnipotent and omniscient, the only reason we can't see him is because he didn't design us to do so. The only reason anything is the way it is because God wants it that way. That's really the ultimate explanation behind everything if God is in control of everything.
I have drawn two stick figures on this piece of paper, okay? So obviously, when you draw like this is one-dimensional. These people are one-dimensional on here, okay? So I, in this situation, would be their creator, right? Okay, I'm three-dimensional, and there's no way that these people, could understand me or see me because they are one-dimensional and I'm three-dimensional.
Excuse me, but do you understand what a fourth wall is? Do you understand what it means to break the fourth wall? It is for characters in other fictions or other dimensions to be able to perceive outside of those dimensions and to be able to see outside of those dimensions. If you wanted to, I see no reason why you couldn't just make stick figures with the capability to understand outside of their one dimension. Likewise, I see no reason why God couldn't just design us with the capability to see him or merely make himself visible.
Okay, the only way that they could understand me or even see me really is if I myself became one of them and I drew myself in on the paper, right? So if I add myself, I'm that one, that small one. If I came onto the paper, it's then that they could understand me because I became one of them. Because
if you became one of them, then at least by the way you've drawn those stick figures, you would be indistinguishable from the rest of them. So how would they know you were a god? This seems to be a less effective means of communicating who you are to people, to just be like everybody else around them.
Other than that, they can't understand me, they can't see me because I'm way out of their brain's comprehension, if that makes sense.
But didn't you design their brain's comprehension? So why couldn't you just make their brain's comprehension bigger or larger or have higher capacity or whatever?
Now the reason I'm doing this is because God did this, okay? God stepped down into our time, became one of us so that we could see him, we could understand him, we could know his character and just how much he loves us.
I see. So God intentionally designed us without the capability to understand dimensions higher than our own, and then made it so that the only way he could communicate with us was to become one of us and be indistinguishable from us. Based on the analogy you've presented, that is what you are saying happened.
And so part of the reason why we can't see God is because we can't understand him. The only way we can understand God and what he is, who his character is, all that stuff is because of Jesus and the way that Jesus lived his life. So other than that, like, we can't see God. And it goes a lot deeper than this, like one-dimensional versus three-dimensional. Like, God is much, much greater than just a couple dimensions greater than us. Like, God is an infinite, holy, almighty, everlasting, eternal God who, like, we can't even begin to wrap our minds around. So don't just...
How many dimensions are there, and how do you know God ranks higher than us on the dimensional scale?
limit him to, like, being a couple dimensions greater than us. That was just my example because I thought that was really cool. But yeah, what I'm saying with all of this is we can't see God. Part of the reason, one of the reasons why we can't see him is because we just can't even begin to understand him.
And why can't we understand God? Is it because we're choosing not to understand God, or, like the stick figures, we simply do not have that capability? Who decided what our capabilities were? Presumably, God did. So God decided that we did not have the capability to understand him and thus could not see him. Correct? Why would God do this and then also try to communicate with us? Why would God put an impediment in our communication and then try to get around the impediment that he created in the first place?
Alright, so to close this video for the first one in the series, I just want to review, just saying, like, yes, even though I can't see God, I do still believe in him, because even though we can't see him, that doesn't mean he's not real.
That doesn't mean he is real either, though.
My favorite thing, like, that I've talked about for this video is the force thing, how even though we can't see forces,
even though we can, given the example of gravity you used, we definitely can.
We know they're real because of the way that they affect everything and how they're working all around us all the time. And just like that, I believe that God is all around us, always working and always affecting everything. But then,
oh yeah, God's sitting in my kitchen living room. Well, I can't see him. Yeah, well, he's there because he's affecting things in there. How is he affecting things in there? Well, my stove wouldn't have fire if it wasn't for God. So yeah, that's basically how this conversation is going right now. If you don't know something exists, how can you tell whether or not it affects anything?
that's everything for this first video. Just saying, like, I am so excited for the rest of this series. Like, I have at least 3 more ideas for it, and I just can't wait to finally share everything with you. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you're excited because I am so stinking pumped, okay? Have a great day, and know that you are so loved and so beautiful.
Can someone explain to me where in this video there was...
And I'm going to talk about why people don't believe in him, you know, trying to get in their shoes and, like, understand their thinking and say, okay, I understand your point, but even with that, here's why I still believe, okay? So
because I don't see that. I see this as a believer's not really even an explanation, just asserting what they believe and not really explaining loaded terms like works in your heart, or softened heart, or infinite, or holy, or almighty, terms that you have not properly defined, so you kind of just assumed we know what these things mean, and then just said, yeah, God is all these things, and yeah. As an introduction to my channel, I think it will be helpful to get an idea of where I personally am coming from by addressing these videos, so I shall. Also, she is very kind in how she expresses her ideas, so I do my best to not go in too hard on her.